Hi, I'm Ben from King Country Towing, and I started the C2C in 2015, and we ran until 2019 for the 40th anniversary. I always really wanted to run a race. When I was a kid in South Wales growing up, my stepdad got me the copies of old car magazines. My family used to bring them in, and I used to go through them and read them all avidly. And then I discovered Car and Driver, and it was the Cannonball edition. And that was the thing that made me look at it and go, I really want to do this. This is something I really, really wanted to do. It like a race across America in American cars and exoticas and through the streets. It just looked like an amazing fun thing to do. So I also got a copy of Custom Car. It showed Cadillac Ranch. And I looked at Cadillac Ranch. I thought, what an amazing American thing. Like Stonehenge with Cadillacs, just an amazingly great piece of art. And they showed it against the sunset. And that was the thing that made me want to road trip America. So I could do all the Route 66 things, see all the Americana. And the thought of doing that with a race, that just seemed like an amazing idea to do. So I planned to do it. I was 6 at the time. And it obviously was going to take a little while before I could drive and I could learn to drive and I could go and find a car and then go to America. But in this time, the Cannonball inexplicably stopped. And I always thought it would come back again, that it would start up and people would go and do another race. But this sort of never really happened. Like it went on and on and on. And then Alex Roy did his run in, I think it was 06. And then Ed did his run. And then we looked at that and it became more popular. And I thought, wow, people are still doing it after all these years. Maybe there's an appetite to do another race. I asked around. I came over in 2013. I bought an old 76 Gran Torino and drove it up to the Lambrecht Chevrolet auction where they sold all the brand new Chevrolets that were dumped in a field, which is an amazing story on itself, I think. Asked people along the way if they'd want to do a Cannonball run. Would they like to do it? Would it be a good idea? Is it still possible? And everybody universally said yes. That was all the excuse I really needed. So as soon as I went back, Facebook had sort of was getting into its stride. I started asking on car forums if people would like the idea of doing a run, and I started asking on van forums, and that's where I met Eric Probst. He was like a Michigan's fastest vanner, we call him now. But he brought back and said, "Yeah, I'll be keen. I'll do a run. I've got a Chevy van with a 454 on it, and I'd love to go for a run." I was like, "Oh, great." And then I caught hold of Fred Ashmore, and he had a 73 Mustang at the time. So we ended up starting talking about that. And he said, "Yeah, I'll be into a run too." I'm like, wow, it's a possibility of a run is really going to happen. So being the naive person I was, I thought the best idea I could do was just go and call up people. So who's the first person I called? Alex Roy. I sent him a message on Facebook. I was like, "Oh, hi, Alex. I'm thinking about doing a run." He said, "Alex Roy being Alex Roy, call me." I'm like, "Okay, I'll call Alex Roy." So I rang him and he's like, "Oh yeah, we had a great chat." He's a really entertaining guy to talk to. And he said, "Hey, we can definitely do that. You should give it a go and it'll be a lot of fun. And if you do it, you should let me know." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, Alex. That's great." I thought, wow, that's amazing. I've talked to Alex Roy. I wonder who we can talk to next. Brock Gates Jr. So I got hold of Brock Gates Jr. And he's like, "Yeah, I don't say why I want to do a run." And he said, "Well, there's already something going. It was the 2904 with John Ficarra." So I thought, well, great. Who else will I ring? I'll ring John Ficarra. I talked to John. And then I said, "Yeah, I'd like to be in the 2904. And he said, "Yes, that'll be great." And I was like, wow. I just talked to nearly everybody. Then I thought, I'll talk to Ed. Talked to Ed, and we just started a friendship like that. It was like immediate. We talked. We had a great fun time about it. We said, "I think I'm gonna do a run." Told him I was going to run in the 2904. And I got myself a car. I bought myself an old Chevy Caprice that was an ex-drug run-in car, apparently, across the country. It had 747 landing lights on the front of it. It had a really, really low rear end, high rear end. It was built to do like 140 miles an hour. And it was just a basic old box Caprice. I thought, perfect, it'll be the perfect car to run the 2904. However, that was the year that John decided to rest the 2904 because there was, I think it was a hurricane in New York or something, that stopped everything. And then I thought, there's only one way I'm ever going to get a chance to do this. And that is for me to do my own run. So I sat down and I thought, what am I going to do? I can't use the Cannonball logos. I didn't want to touch any of that because it was, it's dear to me. It's something I love, and I wanted to do this a little bit differently. So I talked to a designer, Mark Irvin. He used to draw for The Simpsons, and he knocked up the C2C logo for me. And that was it. And then I figured, well, we're fairly official at this point in time. We're going to start a run. And I basically started talking to people and said I was going to do it. Talked to John Harrison, who is like the Grand Master of Cannonball. And he said, well, if you're going to do it, I'll meet you down at the Red Bull and see you guys off. So that was it. I bought a 73 Cadillac sedan de Ville, and Eric had his van, and Fred had a Henry J that was actually, I mean, a Henry J. Of all the cars you're going to do a run in, a Henry J is absolutely the worst car that you could possibly think of. Slow, noisy, unreliable, flathead six, just terrible. Not even a drag-packed one, just a really standard one. So what we did is we all arranged to meet in New York, and it was super exciting. Turned up at Eric's place, stayed on his couch, had the Cadillac. We built it in Rodney Rucker's in Windsor, Arizona. He's a famous car builder. He does a lot of movie cars. And we drove that to New York, and it broke down 40 times on the way and caught fire twice. The first time it caught fire, I was kind of worried about it, but at least it was in Rodney's, and we managed to put it out. And then we were driving down the highway, and someone said, do you smell smoke? Pulled off the highway, electrical fire. We managed to put it out. We bodged it all back together, taped all the wires back together, and thankfully we made it to the start. And it broke down every day, every single day. Every time we went to Detroit, everywhere we went, it just broke all of the time. But when we actually made it to New York, we booked a hotel. Fred disappeared. The Henry J didn't make it. He kept sending videos of it being like going down the road from Maine, and it was broken down again and again and again. It appeared he wasn't going to make it. Eric's van ran perfectly. Didn't miss a beat. Looked fantastic. We turned up. The Cadillac broke down. First thing in the morning, we went to pick it up. Wouldn't start. The rather nice people who had the garage were very angry. And this is New York. People are just angry anyway about everything. We had to try and get the car out of the garage, but it wouldn't run. And they were like, well, you need to get it now. And I'm like, well, I can't. And they're like, well, it's got to go right now. And they got super angry about it. But I was like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to push it out? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, just leave me to fix it. But we fixed it, and it was the points. When we actually got the points right on it, because they were slipping, thankfully didn't break down again. So we turned up into what we thought was the Red Bull. Little did I know, there were 2 Red Bulls. I went to the wrong one. So that was a great start. We all started at the wrong one. John was ringing me like, where are you guys? I'm like, we're at the Red Bull. Where are you? He's like, I think there's another Red Bull. So that was a good start. We turned up. Fred was nowhere to be seen. And then he ended up running. The Henry J ended up going back, and he ran across in a Ford Lightning in the end, all the way from Maine. But me and Eric turned up at the start line. John turned up in his crisp white One Lap of America t-shirt and said, okay, guys, took us into the office. We stamped our punch cards at the Red Bull officially. And before that, we'd all been talking and having fun and not really doing too much until that moment when John turned around and said, okay, guys, it's a race. You better go. And I was like, whoa, it is a race. This is serious. So we ran across. I slid across the bottom of the Cadillac, fired it up, and drove out of New York like basically Gumball Rally. If you've ever seen that and you ever see how impressive it is when you've got a car wide open through New York, that was it. I left in a cloud of dust from the the Red Bull garage, ran the first light, which is traditional. If you ever read the Cannonball book, they run the first light, so I ran that. And then I opened it wide through New York. And this is now, I assume this is way beyond the statute of limitations, so I'll probably tell the full story behind this, which is basically we had a flipped air cleaner, which was our only modification on the car, and we opened it wide through the New York streets. Now, they're quite narrow. They're quite littery, and nobody has ever seen a 73 Cadillac go through New York at 80 miles an hour. It is just something that nobody has, it like looked like something from a movie. We're like shooting off over intersections. Like there's a huge roar, there's litter being thrown up behind us, people are running into doorways. I was like, oh, this seems more tricky. I didn't know how fast you had to drive through New York to get out to the race. So we thought it was flat out all the way. It's not. It's much more sedate than that. You don't actually have to drive as fast as you humanly can to get out of New York. You just need to do it carefully. But we ended up at an intersection with a light, the cop doing the usual thing where they put their white gloves on and stop everybody. And as he turned away from me, I thought, well, I can make up some time by just sneaking past him. So as he turned the other way, we sort of crept out and just started to take off. And as the cop turned around, he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And we just punched it, rode off. We ended up with a cop chasing us on foot through New York briefly, which was quite fun. But if you ever drive a car fast through a city, I can guarantee you it's the most exhausting process you can ever imagine. It's just, you're so tired. It's like being in a race. If you ever do a full track race, when you get the car, you're exhausted from the concentration. And it was like that. By the time we got to New Jersey, I peeled out of the driver's seat, put somebody else in. We ran across the country. The rest of the run was pretty uneventful. Everybody tells you how excited it is to do Cannonball runs and how fast it is. But generally, you're just stuck in a car with 3 other guys for a long, long, long time. Eric had kind of interpreted we tried it 40 hours. He interpreted that as we can stop for ice cream. He was like getting ice creams and like everybody was talking. They were having fun in the van. We were like running it flat out like a pit crew trying to fill this Cadillac up with gas. 13 stops we did. 13 full tanks. Didn't even have an extra tank. All we had was a Magic Hula Girl and an AM/FM radio that didn't work. But it was a great car to run and it was a lot of fun. We got escorted out of New Mexico by the sheriff, who obviously didn't like our 6 headlights on full beam, overtaking everything in sight. So what they did is he came up, drove directly next to the window, looked at us in the car, gave us a hard stare, and then dropped back and followed us all the way out to New Mexico. When we got to the New Mexican border, he just turned around and we just punched it on. We thought that we were doing quite well. And we worked at the time and I was like, wow, 36 hours. We're going to knock off 36 hours in this Cadillac. First ever run we ever done, 36-hour run. Everybody's like celebrating. I'm having an awesome time. It's like, everybody's like, did you work out the time differences? I'm like, what time differences? We go through 3 time zones. We're going to run 41 hours. We panicked. We punched it even harder. I'll tell you the time we made it in a minute. But we did under my goal, but just. We were stopped at the Portofino, of course. We got through New Mexico. There was a terrible rainstorm, and then we figured out the Cadillac, which we bought from the desert because we figured it wouldn't be rusty. What had happened is all around the windshield, it cracked the sealant. And as soon as it rained, the water just poured into the car, like everywhere, through every crack in the car. It was a Sedan DeVille, so it had the windows didn't have any rubber in between them. And the window, it just poured water in it. It was like having a shower. And it just pooled up in the leather seats between your legs, which was the worst, most horrible feeling I've ever had in a car for the next 3 hours, I would imagine, until we drive back out again. But it was a lot of fun. And the car performed pretty good. The only one incident that happened apart from that was we were driving into the dawn and kind of bored. And I looked and I packed a bag of Cheetos. And a huge bag of Cheetos. And they were sat on the transmission tunnel. And they swelled up until they looked like they were about to explode because of the heat of the tunnel. So when I opened it, there was a kind of mind pop. Everybody else was asleep. And I just started mowing through this bag of Cheetos, bored through the night. You know, most people do that. You eat. And as I drove in the morning, my mate wakes up and he goes, "My God," he said, "what happened to your hand?" And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" I had this bright orange Cheeto hand glove. And everybody was just like, I thought it was some kind of disease from the car. But yeah, it was just Cheetos. So I managed to wash it in the wet floor carpet. It was great. Once we got into LA, we kind of started to figure out that we were just about to make it. We made it to the Portofino at 39:45, and that was my first ever Cannonball run. Eric came in 41:30, I think, or something, 42:30, and then Fred came in the Ford F-150 Lightning sometime later at some ridiculous pace from Maine. But it was great. But the first time we turned up, we had a party. The Portofino was great. We had a trophy given, and it was just a lot of fun. It really was. It was the best ever rubbish race you could ever do. But it was a good start.
Premier Financial Services makes it easier and more affordable than you could possibly imagine to own your dream car. Their Simple Lease is one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits like the tax savings and the low payments of a lease with all the additional benefits that you'd normally find in a traditional finance arrangement. You can build up equity, you can pay it off early, you can trade in and out of cars because you get a very clear and easy to understand amortization table to understand what your payoff will be any month throughout your term. And all the while, the amazing team from Premier Financial Services will be right there to help you along the way. They've been supporters of the VINwiki channel now for 5 years in a row, so we can't thank them enough for that, but mostly we're thankful for the fact that they can help you make it easier than ever to own your dream car. Check them out now.